Welcome to this latest podcast from NTT DATA, where we explore the most recent trends and technologies that are transforming industries around the world. I'm your host, Daniel Harrington, and today we're exploring one of the main themes from the recent Money2020 and Sibos conferences. And that theme is artificial intelligence. As we explored in the previous podcast, generative AI is set to revolutionize the world of banking. From hyper-personalized services that improve customer retention and advanced fraud detection systems that set new benchmarks for accuracy, we're experiencing a whole new range of technologies and applications that are going to change the way that bankers do business. And in fact, it's hard to find a facet of banking that will remain untouched by AI, and we're clearly on the cusp of a big leap forward in efficiency and growth. So, NTT DATA was in attendance at both Sibos and Money2020 this year, where the company showcased its latest research findings on the topic of generative AI in banking. So I'm pleased to have two guests joining me today who are experts on the application of technology to banking and have recently returned from both of these conferences. Thank you, Niraj and Madhu, for joining me on the podcast today. Before we delve into the specifics, could you start by telling our listeners a little bit about your respective backgrounds and the work you're doing at NTT DATA? Perhaps you could go first, Madhu.
Yeah. Thank you. It has been a privilege to join Niraj. This is my second or third one in the last few years. So 30 years in the banking and financial industries, I had the opportunity to work with great teams and mentors, and worked in Asia, in Europe, and in North America continents. So last 10 years, I've been an AI practitioner. So in my experience, I worked and created products, worked and established specs for the regulators, wrote a lot of specification and standardization, as well as worked for services company, implementing and delivering to the clients, and then also advising clients to look at how to do the roadmap, how to bring best of breed of technology. So this has been my experience so far, and I'm enjoying it in NTT. I'm located in New York City, and I'm part of FSI Consulting. I do three roles: enterprise architecture, innovation, and also client partner for some of the leading banks in the North America.
Perfect. That's great to hear. Thank you for giving us that. And Niraj, perhaps we could go into your background a little bit as well.
Thanks, Dan, and pleasure to be with you and Madhu in this podcast. So very briefly about my role, I spent 25 years with banks and financial institutions. I think a large part of my journey with financial institutions has been around digital transformation. So we're seeing a lot of enabling technologies for digital transformation, AI being one of those that we're going to discuss today. But more importantly, digital transformation and some of these new technologies as a way to change the business model of an enterprise. So as banks are really evolving, I think they're facing increasing competition from neobanks and fintechs, which are completely digital native, and they embrace some of these technologies much better than the others. So I must say that I'm very fortunate to be in this era, which really lends my job a lot of excitement. Interestingly, Gen AI is the most exciting thing on the block right now.
No, as you've both said, it's a very exciting area to work in, and I'm glad I have both of you here with me today. So to start off, Niraj, you were at Sibos in Beijing recently, which we mentioned a little bit earlier. Now, Sibos, as we're all aware, is organised by SWIFT, whose network underpins around half of all high-value cross-border payments globally. So obviously this conference reflects and represents the core issues and interests of the companies that are shaping the future of banking and payments. And I think especially when it comes to global standards, interoperability and collaboration. So just a very high level, what are your reflections from Sibos? What do you think was really on everyone's lips there this time?
Yeah, so Dan, I think the most interesting thing was that Sibos was in China. And as we all know, China is the capital for all fintechs, the likes of Alipay, WeChat, and some of the others. So it was fairly interesting to see a lot of fintechs and startups participate in Sibos this time. And increasingly, a large number of them were also focused on payments. Uh, and talking about payments, I would say, there has been a transformation in payments, and every financial institution was talking about the next generation of payments, which is right from central bank digital currencies, which are more blockchain based, to real time payments, which are ISO 20022. So there was a lot of focus around exchange of value, which was largely payment oriented. Uh, what was also exciting was that some of the themes that have been there for a while, including cybersecurity, uh, risk and resilience, prevention of financial crime. We did see those themes resonate well this year as well. So there were a lot of conversations around fraud and financial crime. There are a lot of conversations around how you can use some of the latest technologies like Gen AI to prevent security breaches, and cyber security really came to the front as far as some of those conversations were concerned. So overall, I would say great conference, great to be in Beijing. Uh, some of the old themes, but I think the new ones was really it was very exciting to see some of the new organizations and fintechs really participate in this year's conference as well.
Oh, that's great to hear. I think it's particularly interesting the range of topics you bring up. So that's everything from what the newest fintechs are doing, advances in stable coin, in networks, in payments. Such a wide range of things going on. I'm sure there was a bit of a headache afterwards with all of the various tech developments happening. And I think stable coins in particular is an interesting one, just with the rise of, as I'm sure we've all seen, there's the UK trialing its digital gilt instrument, the European Central Bank conducting its own trials. There's been such a wide range, and as you say, having this conference in China, the home of many of these fintechs, and kind of bringing all that knowledge together, it must have been a great exchange of ideas. And I think bringing it back to AI slightly, looking at kind of the innovation that it can enable, as you were saying earlier, how it can kind of change business models that for many banks might not have changed in a good long while. How do you think that AI can enable this innovation on a network that, at least on face value, or as some stakeholders might see it, hasn't changed too much in the last few decades? Do you think there is kind of a greater opportunity there with AI on the scene?
I've always said that AI is a change in mindset. It's not a technology. So a lot of the building blocks that facilitate and enable AI are getting your data in one place. So there's a lot of discipline around data that needs to come in. It is an adoption of different ways of working. It is, getting an automation in play. So there are a lot of things that you get right as you embrace the journey towards AI. But I think if I was to broadly distill it into three advantages, I would say cost, efficiency, and competitive advantage. These are broadly the three advantages that AI really gets on the table. And obviously, when you talk about Swift and you talk about networks like Swift, I think there's a lot of that needs to come in. You know, as payments evolves, as correspondent banking evolves, and as cross-border settlement also evolves. Uh, also interestingly, we saw a lot of focus around alternate payments in Sibos, which is really QR code, wallet-based payments. The entire digitization of the fiat currency and the different mechanisms in which you can transfer value really came to the fore in Sibos. So payments, of course, the most disrupted. Payments, of course, the biggest part of the bank's business as well. And obviously, we'll wait to see how payments adopts more and more of Gen AI and digital technologies.
I think that's a great summary, and I like what you say, that triad of kind of cost, efficiency, and competition, and how banks can, I'm sure that's always a consideration with every technology, and it's about applying those fundamentals to AI as well. And I think bringing it from, all the way from Beijing to Nevada, Madhu, we can, I think, look at Money 2020 a little bit. And I imagine that your experience in Las Vegas was slightly different to Niraj's time in Beijing, if only very slightly. But I think, if anything, perhaps AI was even more of a focus in Vegas, given the human/machine theme of this year. And in fact, NTT DATA's research found that 52% of decision makers favour workflows where AI augments human roles. And, this comes above sort of tight API integrations and kind of neatly ties into the theme, I think. So I think it'd be really interesting to hear about your top takeaways from Money 2020 and some of the interesting conversations you had.
Actually, there are quite a bit of similarities I found. I was listening into what Niraj mentioned in Sibos. The themes from an outcome perspective remain largely the same. There might be a few variations. And Money 2020, this is my 9th Money 2020. So over last 20 years. So, and the second consecutive ones. So what I saw in this Money 20 was there is a good amount of financial institutions, partners, and technology players were infused in the mix. We met roughly around 200 participants that had almost 60 to 70 financial institutions, whether you say they are probably the third-party payment providers or facilitators or aggregators. There are certain 5 to 6 top-tier banks we met. And then we met a lot of integrators and startups and fintech, right? And so with that, also we met with 5 to 6 market agencies who are covering. And if you look around, Swift was there, Modern Treasury was there. If I take these two examples and RS2 systems, right? So it touches upon what Niraj alluded to, right? When Swift is looking at API roadmap in their specifications, so how to bring GenAI, right? And then how to achieve MT to MX, and what kind of summarization and aggregation you can do from the previous version of Swift specifications. When you look at Modern Treasury, they are primarily B2B players. They only work with the large financial corporations for trade finance and treasury services. Now they are looking at B2C, how to bring system integrators into this play, right? What is the envelope of AI and GenAI, which increases total cost of ownership, cost reduction, how to promote unequivocal customer experience, and how do you design future target operating models, right? That's their focus. When you look at RS2, they're primarily saying that how can I enable higher volume of payment transaction go through a platform. So they face so that there is enough payment revenue that every interacting party can generate. So this was the theme. And then to your point, right? There was a plenary session, both banks, industry, and partners. They did. It was on the day one, which kind of focused on human and machine collaboration, like how to bring ethical AI deployment, right? Leveraging human oversight and mitigate biases and regulatory risks. So that came very heavily, strongly. There was 2 use cases, one in alternate investments of wealth, as well as in loan disbursement or loan decision making, how to eliminate bias. That was discussed. Embedded finance and real time, powered by AI. In the real-time payment network, which we discussed earlier, how Swift is aligning it, how everybody is aligning it. And then bringing real-time payment into the corporate payments or high-value payment system was the focus this time. Fraud prevention and privacy with the AI-generated fraud and deepfake financial institutions, almost harnessing their heavy AI-powered investments in risk and fraud management, right? And wealth tech innovation. This was the unique difference this time, is enhancing financial inclusivity and also hyper personalized investment advice and retirement planning. That was the focus. And then, last but not the least, regulatory and ethical challenges. There were regulators. I met with financial FRB, OCC presidents, and now what they are doing is they are trying to bring an API ecosystem where they're trying to use that instead of an audit, a client audit. So, opening up those APIs at a regulatory front to achieve speed, achieve accuracy, and also reporting. So these were all the little bit of a slight deviation from Sibos, but primarily hovered around the large themes that Niraj spoke about.
Oh, that's good to hear. I think, yeah, like you say, there's, despite being continents apart, these companies, they're dealing with a lot of the same issues, despite the kind of slightly different focus. These things all come together. I think the API ecosystem point is perhaps particularly interesting because what we've spoken before, and I think we discussed with Jason on the previous episode about no matter how advanced your AI applications are or your use cases, you'll always need that solid underpinning of, fast, high quality data and kind of having the correct pipeline set up. And I think it's also interesting as you talk about that hyper personalization, that wealth tech innovation side. We're seeing a lot of this. Not only, how can AI make it easier for the employees and for the decision makers, but how can it also create a greater experience for the end user and build that kind of that brand loyalty. And I think on that human crossed with machine theme that we discussed a little bit. I don't know if you saw, but a couple of weeks ago, the JP Morgan CEO, Jamie Dimon, spoke about how we'll have future generations of employees working a day and a half less every week thanks to AI, which is quite an interesting quote. And I know it made a lot of waves when he said it. Do you think that we're going to get these superpowers of productivity in the future?
Yeah, actually, maybe I'll jump in, Niraj. Actually, I'm following JP Morgan very closely. JP Morgan, and I'll also say it because we are talking from an industry perspective. Morgan Stanley are leading in the AI adoption. If you look at it, JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley named chief Gen AI officer roles, the first one in the industry, right? And in both cases, we cite these examples in our global banking hype versus reality white paper that Japan did, NTT Japan. We write 5 examples, right, across the globe, and JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley comes almost resounding, right? So this is and I think therefore there is a higher maturity in my mind. So there are at least 6-7 use cases being into production, right? So in Morgan Stanley, we are working with them on trade surveillance, post-trade surveillance, market abuse type of use cases. Whereas JP Morgan himself, they are trying to do it in-house of improving their customer-facing trade finance experience, right? So using certain algorithms. So that's the liberty we have to say, not beyond that. Over to you, Niraj.
So I think Madhu, you covered it really well. Then, while Madhu was speaking, I was just thinking about the day when the chief AI officer is actually an AI. So uh, I think the way to conceptualize AI is exactly what JP Morgan Chase is saying, right? So they're saying that AI working alongside humans and AI being nothing but an efficiency or productivity tool to get the mundane tasks out of humans, to improve accuracy and to reduce costs, right? I think that is a fantastic way to use AI, right? But I think uh, if I was to leapfrog 10 years, obviously there are going to be some more exciting cases on AI as well. And if you look at the adoption of new technologies, I mean, look at the internet. It took almost about 25 years for everyone to have the internet. Cloud took about 10 years for organizations to adopt cloud. Gen AI, I think, is going to be less than 4 years, where every institution doesn't, they will but adopt Gen AI. And then what happens and what builds on top of Gen AI is going to be really, really exciting. So I would say that Gen AI can well have the disruption that the internet had, where it becomes the building block for all technologies of the future. And I think that is really the use case that a lot of financial institutions are working on. They're not there yet. It's in the early stages, but that's the way to look at it.
No, I think that's a great point, and I like what you said about, maybe one day we'll have AI powered Gen AI officers. I think it's particularly interesting. I don't know if we recall that IBM memo that was sent around in the late 70s or the 80s or something. I'm sure we've all seen where it says, if a computer cannot be held accountable for a decision, then it shouldn't be making them. I'm very roughly paraphrasing that quote, but I think it falls along those same lines. And I think, yeah, like we've said, it's very interesting around those lines of how can we get those productivity increases, not by replacing workers, but by giving them a head start, making sure that they're beginning their workflow from a further point forward, and that much more of their role is, is this correct? Is this an appropriate place to use this information, rather than sourcing it from scratch, or being able to spot these patterns in enormous data sets. And I think we're seeing a lot of that, and I think especially in the research that we're here today to discuss as well.